The camera alert came in a little after 1 in the morning. It showed someone standing near the side of the house. 30 seconds later, the motion alert stopped. Not because they left, because they were no longer outside. Most people think being home alone feels quiet, safe even. You lock the doors, you turn on a few lights, you settle in, and after a while, the house starts to feel predictable. Every sound has a reason, every shadow makes sense, until one small detail doesn't. In all three of these true stories, someone thought they were completely alone. Then a sound, a camera alert, or one tiny thing out of place proved they were not. And in each case, the worst part was not the moment they panicked. It was the moment they realized the danger had already been there for a while. The first story came from a woman who was 22 years old and staying alone in her parents' house for the weekend. They lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Nothing unusual ever really happened there. No break-ins, no strange neighbors, no stories people whispered about. Her parents had gone out of town that Friday morning. She got home around 6, made food, watched TV in the living room, and texted a friend for a while. It was normal, boring even. By around 10:30, the house had gone completely still. She said that was the first reason she noticed something felt off. Not because she heard something loud, but because the kitchen suddenly felt colder than it should have. At first, she thought it was nothing. The back of the house always got a little draft at night, but this felt different. She looked toward the hallway that led into the kitchen and noticed the back patio light was on. That caught her attention because she clearly remembered turning it off earlier. She got up, walked into the kitchen, and stopped near the counter. Nothing looked wrong at first. Then she saw it. The back door was closed, but not all the way. Not open, not obviously unlocked, just slightly wrong. It was the kind of thing you would only notice if you already knew how it looked when it was fully shut. The frame didn't line up quite right. There was the thinnest dark line between the door and the ceiling. She froze. Her first thought was that maybe she had somehow forgotten to shut it properly, but she hadn't opened that door once that night. She stepped closer and saw that the deadbolt was turned, but the door itself was not sitting fully in place. She didn't open it. Instead, she looked down. There was a faint, muddy mark on the kitchen tile just inside the door. Not a full shoe print, more like part of a sole. A smear with enough texture to show it came from outside. At that point, something in her mind shifted. Before that, she had been trying to explain things. The light, the cold air, the door, the mark on the floor. Now she was thinking about one thing only. Someone had either tried to come in or already had. She locked the deadbolt again, pushed a chair under the knob, stepped back, and grabbed her phone. While calling her older brother, she heard a soft sound from outside. Not a knock, more like the slow scrape of something brushing against the door. She moved away from the kitchen, locked herself in the downstairs bathroom, and stayed on the line until police arrived. They checked the backyard, the side gate, the shed, and the street behind the house. They found nothing. No one. By the time the officers left, it almost felt unreal. Then the next morning, her brother came over. He noticed the side gate latch had been bent just enough that it no longer closed correctly. There were fresh marks in the dirt near the fence. And beneath the kitchen window, there were 2 partial shoe prints in the flower bed. Someone had been in that yard, and at some point that back door had been moved. Maybe only a few inches, but enough to let the cold air in. Enough to let her know she had not been alone. The second story came from a college student who was living with his aunt for the summer while working a late internship. Her house was older, 2 stories, narrow staircase, hardwood floors that creaked when anyone moved around upstairs. On one of the nights she was working a hospital shift, he got home a little after 11. He locked the front door, heated up leftovers, and sat on the couch watching TV with the volume low. The house was dark except for the living room lamp and a small light over the stove. It was just after midnight when he heard the first sound from upstairs. One step, then silence. He muted the TV and listened, nothing. The house was old, so he tried to brush it off. Wood expands, pipes shift, floors settle. Then he heard it again. This time it was 2 steps, slow, soft, spaced apart in a way that made it worse. Because it sounded careful, he stood up and walked to the bottom of the stairs. The upstairs hallway was dark. He called out his aunt's name even though he knew she was at work. No answer. He went back to the couch, unmuted the TV, and almost immediately heard a sound from directly above him. A slow shift of weight across the floorboards. He muted the TV again. Then came a noise he could not explain away. A door upstairs opened. Not fast, not violently, just that very specific wooden sound of an interior door slowly moving inward. He grabbed his phone and backed away from the living room. His first thought was to run out the front door. But to do that, he would have had to cross the entryway at the base of the stairs. If someone was already coming down, he would be exposed instantly. So instead, he moved into the laundry room near the kitchen and shut the door as quietly as he could. Then he called 911. The dispatcher told him to stay on the line and remain hidden. As he whispered his address, he heard movement again. This time not overhead, on the stairs. One step, then another, then a pause. He could hear the person moving slowly. Not like someone searching in panic, more like someone listening. Then the sound reached the bottom of the staircase. A few seconds later, the laundry room doorknob moved, just slightly. Not a hard twist, more like a test. That was the moment he knew the person was no longer upstairs. They were in the kitchen, tasked only a few feet away. The knob moved again, then stopped. A few seconds later, he heard footsteps crossing the kitchen and heading away from him. When officers finally entered the house, they found the upstairs guest room window open. The screen had been cut near one corner. There were marks on the siding outside where someone had clearly climbed up using the lower roof over the garage. They searched the entire house and never found the intruder. That part made it worse, because it meant the person had gotten out before police fully surrounded the property. Months later, he said the sound of footsteps above him could still make his chest tighten, not because of what he imagined, because one night it turned out not to be his imagination at all. The third story came from a woman living alone in a rental house on the edge of a small town. The house wasn't isolated exactly, but it sat on a corner lot with a long driveway and more space between homes than she was used to. When she moved in, one of the first things she did was install a doorbell camera and 2 motion cameras. One covered the driveway, the other faced the side yard and back gate. She said it made her feel better at night, until one night it didn't. It was a little after 1 in the morning when her phone buzzed with the first motion alert. She was in bed but still awake. The notification came from the side yard camera. When she opened it, she saw a person standing near the side of the house, not close enough for a clear face. Just a dark figure in a hooded sweatshirt, half turned away, standing still. At first, she thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe someone passing by, maybe someone cutting across the property. Then she realized there was no reason for anyone to be standing there at that hour. She opened the live camera feed. Nothing. The side yard was empty. That was the moment she almost convinced herself it was over. Then the second alert came in. Backyard motion detected. This time the clip showed the same figure moving near the fence line behind the house. That changed everything. Now she knew the person was not passing by. They were moving around the property. She called a friend first instead of 911. Later, she admitted it was because calling emergency services would have made the whole thing feel real. Her friend answered, listened for a few seconds, and told her to call the police immediately. While they were still on the phone, the porch light outside her kitchen turned on, then off, then on again. She didn't touch it. It was triggered by motion. She left the bedroom, moved down the hallway in the dark, and checked the doors. The front door was locked. The slider near the kitchen was locked. Then she heard a soft metallic sound near the side entrance, like pressure on the handle. She backed away and finally dialed 911. The dispatcher told her officers were on the way and asked whether she could get to a safe room. She went into the bathroom connected to her bedroom, locked both doors, turned off her phone screen, and sat on the floor. While whispering to the dispatcher, she got another notification. Camera offline. She stared at the words for a second and felt her stomach drop. A few moments later, the driveway camera also went offline. Before that, she at least knew where the danger was. Outside, on a screen. Now she had no idea where that person was. Then came the worst part. Not a loud crash, not forced entry, footsteps, very faint. Inside the house, maybe? Or just outside the bedroom? She could not tell. Then she heard a slow drag from the other side of the bathroom wall, like something brushing along painted drywall. She covered her mouth and stayed perfectly still. Then came one light tap against the bedroom door, not a knock asking to be let in, more like someone checking whether the sound inside would change. Seconds later, she heard sirens in the distance, then fast movement, then nothing. Officers arrived and cleared the property. They didn't find the person, but they did find evidence. Fresh pry marks near the latch on the side entrance. A nearby window screen had been cut, and one of the exterior camera cables had been pulled loose by hand. The police could not confirm the intruder had fully entered the house, but they could not rule it out either. There was a second interior door near the side entrance that had not been latched properly. Nothing had been stolen. Nothing obvious had been moved. But near that threshold, there was a faint smudge on the floor that looked like dirt from the edge of a shoe. In all three of these stories, the danger didn't begin when the victims finally panicked. It began earlier, with a patio light that should have been off, with footsteps that sounded too careful to be random, with a camera alert that stopped making sense the moment it disappeared. That is what makes stories like these stay with people. Not the screaming, not the chase, not even the police lights at the end. It's the realization that something was wrong while the house still looked normal. A door was almost shut. A hallway was almost empty. A room was almost safe. And once you've had a moment like that, you never hear nighttime silence the same way again. If you want more true stories like these, subscribe. And if you've ever had a moment at home that felt wrong before you could explain why, leave it in the comments. Because sometimes the scariest part is how small the first sign really was.